The day a cop shot me on the courthouse steps, the sky was stupidly beautiful, clear and gold like something out of a postcard, and I honestly believed if you did the right thing, the system would stand between you and the bullet, not deliver it. So when I tell you what happened next, understand, this is not a story I heard on the news. This is my life. My name is Marcus Johnson. I was 15 when Officer Scott Wilson put a hole in my chest in front of half the courthouse and a dozen phone cameras, and I was still on the ground trying to breathe when he started screaming that I went for a gun, while my phone slid away across the stone like the punchline to a joke I never agreed to. That morning started in my kitchen. Quiet sunlight through cheap blinds, the hum of the fridge, and my dad leaning on the counter watching me straighten a navy tie that used to belong to my mom. She'd passed 3 years earlier breast cancer, but she was still running that moment in my head. How you show up is how they decide whether to listen. So I was trying to look like someone a courtroom would take seriously, even if I was still a kid reheating leftover waffles. My dad is Raymond Johnson, director of the Atlanta field office for the FBI in our district. The guy local news calls when something explodes or a mayor gets indicted. The guy certain cops and politicians smile at in person and curse out in private. And that morning his whole face was this mix of pride and worry, like he'd spent his whole career cleaning up other people's messes and suddenly realized his son was walking straight into one. I was scheduled to testify against 3 white boys who beat my friend Trevor for walking through the wrong neighborhood with the wrong skin, the kind of case that usually goes quiet. But I saw it happen. I agreed to tell the truth, and my name got put on that witness list, like a target, you know what I mean? All week, I'd been getting texts from blocked numbers. Stay home. You show up, you'll regret it. Snitches don't make it to the stand. The usual coward package I showed Dad. One thread, his jaw locked. He told me not to reply, not to back down. That backing down is how bullies turn into systems. And then just before we left, he got a call from headquarters. Something big that only he could touch, of course. And he hesitated with his keys in his hand and said he'd meet me at the courthouse before I went in. Take an Uber, he said. No bus, text me when you get there. And I said I would, meaning it in that moment. But after he left, I stood in that kitchen with my tie too tight and my stomach on fire and decided saving the world could go first, that he had handled worse than a local assault case and I could handle a 20-minute ride alone. I took the bus. People always ask why, like ignoring my dad's ride is the twist that justified a bullet. Like catching public transportation is Exhibit A. And that's part of the sickness, that instinct to ask what I did wrong, instead of why somebody already had their finger on the trigger. Anyway, I noticed a white sedan behind us for a while, never passing, always there. But I told myself I was being dramatic, put my earbuds in, stared out the window at murals of civil rights heroes painted over cracked brick walls, the kind of thing cities love to point at while pretending history is fully fixed. When I got off at this courthouse, the air was cool, the building big and serious with its columns and seals. I checked the time, straightened my tie, grabbed my phone to text my dad, and that's when I saw him. Officer Scott Wilson standing at the top of the steps, like he'd been waiting on someone, hand resting on his holster, in that casual way that's not casual at all, scanning people landing on me. I knew his type, and later I would learn his file, complaint after complaint, excessive force, racial bias, all wiped clean by the same machine that put him on those steps that morning. "Where you headed?" he called down. "Inside, sir. I'm a witness," I said loud enough for people near me to hear. He told me to stop, asked for ID. I said it was on my phone, started to reach into my pocket, and in the time it takes to breathe in, he made a choice he'd rehearsed. "Gun!" he shouted like a cue and fired. The impact stole everything: sound, air, gravity. I remember the sky tipping the steps, punching my back, the warmth spreading across my shirt, my tie sliding sideways, my phone clattering away with the screen still lit, and his voice again. He went for a gun. He went for a gun. Like he was begging the world to believe him before they even saw me. Somebody screamed, he just had a phone. Somebody else yelled. To keep recording, a security guard froze halfway down the stairs, torn between protecting truth and protecting the badge next to him. And then there was the sound of an engine, and my dad's voice shredding through the noise. He came out of a black SUV running full speed, badge in one hand, the other already going to my chest. "That's my son," he said, and it cut through the whole scene. Cops, cameras, all of them, because suddenly the bleeding kid wasn't just another black teenager on a local feed. He was the son of the man who signs off on federal investigations into people like them. To his credit, he didn't collapse. He went to work pressure on the wound, ordering them to call paramedics to secure the scene. But as they loaded me into the ambulance, I saw Wilson at the top of the stairs, gun hanging slack, looking less like a protector and more like a man realizing he'd shot the wrong name. I don't remember much after that. Just flashes of the ambulance ceiling, my dad's voice, the sirens, the feeling that the world was narrowing down to a question, am I going to die for doing what I was raised to believe in? When I woke up in the ICU later, there was a tube in my throat, monitors everywhere, my chest wrapped, my dad sitting there in a blood-stiff suit, his face so tired he looked older than his own father, and in the corner of the room, a TV quietly rewriting my story. Teen suspect shot during courthouse incident. Sources say victim had behavioral issues. They dug up a middle school fight, stretched it into a history of aggression. Never mind that the official record was me defending a smaller kid from a bully. Never mind that I was the one going to testify for a friend who got beaten, not the one throwing punches for fun. On the other side of the city, Wilson was already home on paid leave. Commissioner Kendrick was on camera saying it was a tragic situation, asking the public to remain calm. Judge Patterson sealed the courthouse footage, pending review. The cameras, we were told, malfunctioned at the exact minute I was shot. That was the first time I saw my father look truly lost. Then came the second time. A nurse walked in on a guy in stolen scrubs at my bedside hand on my IV line syringe loaded with potassium chloride, the stuff that stops a heart fast. He bolted, but the hospital cameras caught enough to trace his car back to a shell company tied to the police union's favorite contractor. That was when my dad shifted gears from devastated father waiting for answers to federal sledgehammer. When he finally told me all of this, he said it as calmly as if he was talking through a case file, but his hands were shaking. He pulled in a tiny team from the bureau he trusted, plus his deputy Michelle Chen and my Aunt Elaine, who knew Judge Patterson's habits a little too well from her DA days. Priya, their tech, dug into the corrupted courthouse footage frame by damaged frame, and what she pulled out became the twist nobody in power wanted on record. On screen, you could see me walking up, empty hands, Wilson watching, then a cut, then a sliver of video. They thought they'd erased Wilson on the steps with his phone to his ear, a voice on the line telling him, "Do it clean, don't hesitate, he knows too much," and Wilson answering, "Yes, sir, Commissioner." They had meant to get rid of it, but pieces stuck in the system, and Priya stitched enough together. At the same time, my dad's team found a witness protection transfer list where a name had been swapped. Elijah Brown, a low-level courier who flipped on Kendrick's drug and money network, replaced with my details. Wrong kid in the right tie. The way my dad put it, they used the same old racist script because they knew this country has a terrible habit of believing a scared cop over a bleeding black boy, and they counted on that to cover up a hit. When that wasn't enough, a man named Paul Brennan, courthouse security, called my dad from a blocked number. He said he'd heard the call to Wilson, seen the memos, knew Merrick and Patterson were in on a long-running game where Wilson was the cleanup guy for loose ends. Brennan brought proof to a meeting by the freight yard. He handed over a flash drive, told my dad he was late to growing a conscience, and then a shot from the dark dropped him before he reached his car. My dad walked away with another man's blood on his hands and a drive full of rot. Off that one drive and the recovered footage, the feds got warrants. One morning, while I was still learning how to sit up without shaking, the city woke up to Kendrick Chief Hayes and Judge Patterson being walked out of their homes in cuffs. It was all over TV, talking heads screaming about systemic betrayal, people arguing in barber shops and break rooms whether this was justice or politics. You'd think that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Michelle, my dad's deputy, got caught accessing sealed evidence after hours. Elaine confronted her and she said Kendrick's people had her brother under their thumb, that she'd been feeding them information to keep him alive, that he ended up dead anyway, and she'd started recording them out of guilt recordings that reached higher than anyone expected, including the governor's office laughing about keeping the bureau off our backs. That part didn't make the evening news, at least not then. What did make it was the trial they called the case that cracked the city. By the time I took the stand, I had a scar up my chest, a tremor in my hands, and just enough teenage anger left to keep my voice steady. I told the jury exactly what happened on those steps, how I was there to testify, how Wilson stopped me, how I reached for my phone, not a weapon, how I heard him call gun before he fired, how the next thing I knew I was drowning in my own blood. No speech, no dramatics, just the truth. Then they put Wilson up. He'd taken a plea for a lighter sentence in exchange for talking. Out of uniform, he looked small or tired. The prosecutor asked why he fired. He glanced at me, then at Kendrick at the defense table, and finally said the words everyone was pretending not to know. They picked him for jobs like that because of his record, because he reacted the way they needed him to react when certain kids moved a certain way, because he was told I was a threat, told not to hesitate, told Kendrick would back him no matter what he did. The courtroom went quiet in that way where you can hear people's hearts rewriting their excuses. When the verdicts landed, Kendrick got 20 years, Patterson got 18. A string of officers and fixers followed, and Wilson got 12. A lot of folks cheered. A lot of others said it was too harsh or not harsh enough, or that the whole thing was a political show. The government quietly pulled my dad's promotion, sent him a polite letter saying his public profile was now a liability. Our house got tagged one night, traitor. Neighbors brought coffee and apologies and stories about sons pulled over for no reason, daughters followed in stores, friends who didn't make it. The city wanted to feel clean again. I just wanted to feel normal. 1 year later, there's a glass building a few blocks from the same courthouse where I bled, the Atlanta Center for Police Reform and Public Integrity. My dad runs it, my aunt helps. I walk through sometimes and watch kids on school trips looking at real-time data on stops and complaints. Watch them stand under a photo of me in that hospital bed with the words, "Silence protects no one," on the wall, and it's surreal, like seeing your worst day turned into a mission statement. People say we won. I don't know if that's the word. I'm alive. The men who ordered my death and built that machine around Wilson are wearing jumpsuits instead of suits. The city knows more today than it did before. At the same time, the governor in those recordings is still out there smiling for cameras while other people haggle over what to do next. Wilson will serve his time and probably spend the rest of his life trying to convince himself he was just following orders. And I still flinch when I see a cop put his hand on his holster near a kid who looks like me. So you tell me. Was this justice, or was it the system tossing a few of its own into the fire to keep the rest standing? Did they fix something or just patch the wallpaper? Would any of this have happened if my dad didn't have 3 letters on his badge and a card every camera recognized? And if the answer is no, what does that say about everybody else whose father can't walk past the tape? You've heard my side. Now I want to hear yours. Drop a comment. Tell me if you think this was a victory, a cover, or something in between. Tell me if you've seen this play out in your town, in your family, on your street, where someone got painted as the problem to protect the people pulling the strings. Share this with the one person you know who still thinks this is all just stories on the internet. And if you want more real stories told by the people who lived them, not just the people who wrote the reports, hit like, hit subscribe, and keep talking, because the only reason they got away with this for so long is that too many good people stayed quiet, and I'm done being one of them.